Well, welcome to Facebook Live with Melissa and myself. Well, welcome to Facebook Live with Melissa and myself. It's a real delight to me to have Melissa with me this morning because she's my assistant, but she is a gem of a woman and very wise in so many ways. So I wanted to talk to her about this whole issue of rhythms and rituals. But I want to start by reading out a little ritual that Randy Woodley talks about in this book, a beautiful ritual that some of you might want to take for the day or adapt for your own setting. And this is number 81 in here. As a child in Sunday school, when I was first taught to pray, I was told to fold my hands, bow my head, and close my eyes. Later in life, I learned to pray with my eyes open and by facing the 7 directions: east, south, west, north, sky, earth, and then for myself. I like the open-eyed 7-direction prayer much better. So I face the east, remembering to be thankful for the new day and all new things that come. Then I turn to the south, where the warm sun provides time to work and take care of life's necessities. I turn to the west, where the sun sets, accepting the places of death and darkness, which are all part of life. Then I turn to the north, towards winter, innovation, storytelling, and the passing on of traditions and the building of family. I turn back to the east and look up, thanking great mystery for all things in life. Then I look down to show my gratitude to Mother Earth, from where all things grow. Finally, my last thought is of myself. I ask for help because I am simply a human being. Isn't this a beautiful blessing or a beautiful kind of little ritual with which to start the day? And of course, it only takes a couple of minutes. Now, for those in the Southern Hemisphere, obviously, you would need to adapt it so that you face north for the sun and south for the winter. But it is, the beauty of it is that it can be really adapted for any part of the world in which you live. And I think that we need rituals that we can adapt to any part of the world. And that's what we're going to talk about to a certain extent today. But I just want to quickly start by talking about what I talked about in Meditation Monday this week, which was the 2 types of rituals. And Melissa told me, yeah, you got to talk about that.
Yes.
And I first talked about that in this book, God's Space, which I wrote. When was it published? It was published in 2006. But it's something that I think I've grown in appreciation of. And it wasn't my idea. As I say, Paul Hebert, anthropologist, gave me this idea from working with Indigenous tribes in different parts of the world. And he talks about rituals of restoration. In this type of ritual, people gather together to restore their faith in the beliefs that order their lives and to rebuild the religious community in which these beliefs find expression. In other words, we all need communities which have similar kinds of beliefs to us. Tom and I were just at the Inhabit conference here in Seattle. It's the first live conference we've been to, and talk about being in a group where we felt at home. We felt, it really was a restorative ritual. It restored our belief in the kinds of things and the kinds of people that we wanted to gather with. And the second type of practice is what Dr. Hebert calls rituals of transformation. These provide a structure that enables us to bring change into our lives. Hebert explains that these rituals are characterized by a high degree of creativity and what he calls anti-structure. They cut through the established way of doing things and restore a measure of flexibility and personal intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the retreats that Tom and I do every 3 to 4 months are restorative, because they really are meant to cut across what we've been doing. And I think part of what that does, as it restores that flexibility, is that it stops the practices we have from stagnating and really making us stagnate as well. And so I love this definition. I haven't found a better one for the kinds of rituals and rhythms that we need in our lives. So, Melissa, what do you think about when you think about this topic?
Well, it's interesting. I actually think about the Sabbath. It is sort of meant to be, as it's set up biblically, rest from work, rest from sort of the everyday rituals of life. And I just think it's interesting that such a regular time was instigated in the Bible in order to sort of disrupt those patterns, because I think it is in those places where we find rest and restoration.
Oh, very definitely. And I think that the wonderful thing about the Sabbath is that evidently, it's the one ritual in the Jewish calendar that there is no kind of natural, as it were,
Right.
equivalent to. And it was something that God gave specifically to the Hebrews in order to help them find that rest and restoration.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Abraham Heschel, in his little book on Sabbath, talks about how it looked forward to it. It was the culmination of their week. And he talks about the fact that it wasn't just rest and restoration, but it was a glimpse into God's eternal world. This was the time that people rested. They enjoyed what they'd done over the previous week, and they enjoyed each other, and they enjoyed life. That was part of what Sabbath was about as well. And I just love that kind of an imagery which we need in our lives, as well as which I think can very much help us to enter into, what Sabbath is all about.
Yeah, and I think that so we're exploring a broader topic on God's space right now in the blog and through these talks and things about restoring rhythms and seasons. That's our theme. And I just find it interesting that that is sort of a restoring rhythm. And actually, there are many types of Sabbaths that were given right in the Bible. And one of them is a Sabbath of the land, having a field lie fallow for a while to rest and restore. And I bring that up because I think it's one of those earth connections that we're trying to find here as we're looking into our, restoring rhythms and seasons. When I think of restoring rhythms and seasons, I actually think of it in two ways. In one, we need to find things that are restoring. What are rhythms that restore us? What are the places and seasons or seasons themselves that bring that restoration? That's one way to think about it. And the other way I think about it is we need to get back. We need to restore some of these rhythms and seasons that connect us to the Lord, connect us to ourselves, and connect us to the earth. That we've really gotten away from sort of an ecological view in our faith and become really disconnected, fragmented people. And when you were talking about community, for example, and what a joy it was to find all those like-minded people together, I think we're really just disconnected in every way. And whether you have a large group of people or not to connect to, one way to really have some restoration for yourself is to connect to the seasons around you and to the earth.
I think that's great, Melissa. I couldn't agree more. I think I'm recognizing more and more how we don't just need connection to people, but we need connection to the land as well. And the rhythms and rituals that we live by is something that can help us connect in that way. I was reading, before we started this, I was reading Elaine Breckenridge's post for the morning, and she talks about rituals of spring. And I love that, and it's what she's talking about is refreshment and entering into the world and the spirituality of the world that God has given to us. It's not kind of worshiping the land, but it's recognizing the presence of God in the land, and how that's something that we need to steward and care for, as well as being aware of the people that we should be connecting to or are connecting to, and the need that we have to really incorporate those connections to people in our rituals as well. I think
I agree.
Incredibly important.
Yesterday we featured a post from Randy Woodley, who you read from, and I think that the post, which is really pretty much the introduction to his book, really talks a lot about that, how we need to be aware of the land we're on, and look to the people who came before us and who were centered here and indigenous to this place, and how they reacted to the seasons around them, and let that sort of guide us. So if you haven't seen that post yet, I highly recommend it.
Oh, I do too. It's just a great post. And I think it's often the indigenous peoples that can help us to make these kinds of connections. I mean, I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, when I came to the States, I was still very much connected to the rhythms and rituals of the Southern Hemisphere. And it took me a number of years to really adjust to things like, for me, Christmas is in the middle of summer.
Right.
Not in the middle of winter. But on the other hand, one of the things that I loved about the Northern Hemisphere was that it connected the rhythms and rituals that I knew, that I'd been using for years in some ways, the liturgical rituals, to the world in which I lived. I was now living, which it hadn't happened in the Southern Hemisphere. And I find these days I'm grappling with two questions as I try to make the connections that we're talking about. One of them is, what kind of rhythms and rituals do we need? And secondly, how do they help us connect to the land in which we live, not to the land in which we came from? Because I was reading a delightful little book that somebody in New Zealand recommended to me. That was written by a New Zealander for New Zealand about the rhythms and rituals of New Zealand, and the seasons and celebrations that they needed to be able to connect to there. And the author made the comment that when the Europeans came to New Zealand, they brought with them rhythms and rituals that connected to the place that they had come from, because that gave them a sense of connection to home.
Right.
Which is fine, except that they never lost that, and they never really connected to the new home in which they'd found themselves. And I thought, even though many Europeans moving to the United States and Canada didn't, they weren't going to a totally different world. They were still maintained rhythms and rituals that connected them more to the European climate and even the European vegetation, or, they connected them to a home that they no longer lived in. Right. And so one of the questions that I've been kind of mulling over is, what are the rhythms and rituals that would specifically, for example, help me connect to the Pacific Northwest where I live. You know, none of the symbols that we tend to use tend to be local symbols.
Poinsettias at Christmas.
Sorry?
Poinsettias at Christmas.
Exactly. Yeah. And daffodils and things at Easter. You know, I mean, I love them. They're wonderful, but they're European symbols. So what are the local symbols? You know, I love some of the photos that June Friesen has been posting on God's Space Light, because I thought these connect, and I'm sure connect her to the desert where she lives. You know, they're local kinds of symbols. And so it's just something I've started to mull over, and I look around my garden and I think, are there any native plants in it?
Well, it actually reminds me, just to go back a little bit, to the types of rituals that you were talking about in the very beginning. It's almost like we forget which ones are sort of that steadfast and which ones need to be transformative. So in other words, you know, what of Christmas, for instance, do we keep? And what is actually something that can be transformed, or something that can connect us better? You know, so I don't know, it's just interesting, because you can keep the things that make you feel like home, or you can keep the things that are important about it, right? Like, you know, celebrating Christ's birth, and there's many things in the sort of liturgical traditions that can be celebrated anywhere.
Exactly, yeah. But then we need to find local symbols as well. I like that, Melissa. I think that's really great suggestion for people, that to find what are the things, because we want to remain rooted in the story, and rooted in our faith. But what are the things that can help to root us in the land in which we live as well? I think that's just so important. And it's not a question that most of us ask when we think of rhythms and rituals, you know. I think even, and the same thing with the rhythms often we have for the day. I think that I'm looking to see if anybody's got a question or a comment to make here. You know, but for the rhythms and rituals of the day as well, we've got the same thing that we really need to think of. You know, I mean, I can tend to use the same rituals in summer as I do in winter. And to a certain extent, that's good, but to another extent, that's not good, you know. And here's where I think part of what Elaine Beckeridge talks about, and of course what Lily and I kind of talked about a bit when we did our summer spirituality webinar last year, is that we need to find symbols that connect us to the season as we live in it, kind of thing, you know. So it's it's a really good thought to think about. And of course, you know, it has even more traction to a certain extent for people that live closer to the equator, but they don't have the change of the night and day, but they have other kind of seasonal changes that they might want to try and connect to, you know. Be a good question for June, in fact. What are the local things that she can connect to? So, well, Melissa, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have rhythms and rituals that connect you in the ways that we're talking about?
I'm in a season of transition right now, so I've been trying to find my footing with that. But you know, I have two children, and they're an adult and almost an adult now, and so for Christmas, for example, the last couple of years have been about that. Like, okay, what are the rituals we do for this to feel and mean Christmas to us? But I can't do it the way I've been doing it because they're not tiny children anymore. So this is one example, and I'm sorry, this is just what comes to mind.
This is great.
So when they were little, there was a book that I had been given as a child by my aunt, and just a cute little book. And so one of our traditions is we would turn off all of the lights except the Christmas tree, and we would snuggle up, and then I would read them this particular book by the light of the Christmas tree, and sometimes some other books too, and usually on Christmas Eve. But after when they got to be about 10 or so, that didn't seem like a very fun thing to do, so that I had to adapt my tradition and to stay sort of rooted in what I wanted to do with it, right? And what was important in our family about this tradition, but adapt it for older children. So now on Christmas Eve, they get a new set of pajamas and a book. And we all gather by the light of the Christmas tree in our pajamas, and we start reading our book, and we just, even though I'm not reading aloud to them anymore, although I did for quite a while, even though it wasn't that book, we're spending time together, and it's cozy, and it just sort of that connectedness that I was going for. So sorry, that's just the one main example.
I think that's a great example, because I think that families can have the hardest time adapting the ritual, because it's almost like they think that the rituals they've established are set in concrete. And as their kids grow older, they need new rituals. Or what I love about what you did there is that you've taken part of the old ritual that connects them to family in a lot of ways, but you reinterpreted it in a way that acknowledges the fact that they've grown older.
Yes.
And that things need to change, and I think that's a beautiful example of some of what we can and we should do in terms of the rituals and rhythms of our lives. And and I think it's good for all of us to think about these kinds of things in the way that you must have put a lot of thought into those changes.
I did.
It sounds simple, but it's not necessarily. Well,
it did take a little bit of thinking and creativity on my part, and it evolved, a little bit over time into what it is now. But it was just a way to keep us connected to even just that feeling of the childhood coziness for myself as well. That was just something I really enjoyed adapting.
Well, and I loved that you told me that you used my new book, Digging Deeper.
Yes.
To help
that is
you.
A new current ritual.
Do you want to tell how that's helped you?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm in a season of transition right now, and felt like the Lord was telling me now is time for some healing. So I just moved into a new space, and I just had the privilege of being one of the editors of Christine's new book, which is out now on Amazon, if you weren't aware, Digging Deeper, The Art of Contemplative Gardening. Very exciting. Oh, yep, there it is. And so as I was reading through it, I actually was really inspired to make a tiny little one for myself. I have it here. I don't know. I tested it on the camera before, so we'll see if you can kind of see all the little things. It's very small.
Great.
So basically, it's just an aloe plant in this tiny little pot, but
they're not aloe flowers that I see there.
No, those are roses. Those are dried roses that were given to me by somebody special, and the first flowers I received from this person. And so, so it's just kind of become a part of my little self mantra that I'm worthy of being loved, and just reminding myself that it's okay for me to heal, and it's okay for me to be loved. And then this is a little sculpture that one of my children made for me. It's a little kitty cat that I have there. And then this is a rock that I found on a beach that just stuck out to me and was special to me because it came to me at a time when I was questioning things, and I just felt like it was the one light colored rock on this really dark part of the beach, and it just felt like a little ray of sunshine from the Lord. And the plant itself, aloe is kind of spiky, and I love to just run my fingers along it as I'm praying, and just remembering that healing isn't always perfect, and it's not always linear, and just that, yeah, but it's still happening, and it's still soothing, and it's still good. So
Beautiful.
that was my new little ritual.
I love that. Well, and for those that don't know, the aloe plant is used in healing. It's
Yes.
a plant for healing.
That's
So
why I chose it specifically. Yes.
yeah, so that's beautiful, Melissa, not because it relates to my book, but just because of, kind of what the elements that you put in it. And I'm sure that it brings healing. And I think that's part of what rituals, of course, are meant to help us do, particularly those, well, I think both restorative and transformative rituals can bring us healing. And of course, there can be an overlap between those as well, which is good to realize.
Yeah, part of the reason I put some of the objects there is because it's sort of what the idea was, connecting to my past, the good things, the healing things, the lovely things I want to hold on to. So that's the cat sculpture, and sort of my present with the rock, and then the flowers sort of represent the future. Is just that I want to live into a place of being healed and knowing my worth. So that's kind of what that garden is all about.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm so glad I asked you to tell that story. It's just the whole thing of rhythm and ritual is just so important for us. And I think we're going to do some other sessions on this because of the importance. And I think particularly, all of us are facing transitions at the moment. Some of us relatively small transitions, but all of us transitions, some of us huge transitions. And I think, unfortunately, many of us are wanting to go back to the rituals of the past,
right,
rather than finding new rituals and rhythms that are really meant for the future. And
I agree.
so and I think that that's something that we need to become both aware of and recognize that, kind of we need change. I mean, I find that one of the things, and I'm not sure, I didn't try this, but I've still got my beauty sign that I made during Lent. And obviously it's been a little too close to the coffee. But it's very meaningful for me. And actually it stands most of the time at the back of the current garden I have, which is my Digging Deeper garden here, which has gone through several transitions. And now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, and part of what, of course, I've loved about these gardens is that they encourage me to sit with something for a season and then to think it's time for a change. God's saying this is, and to accept that, and to be willing to let go of what I had and to create something new. And that really is something that I see obviously has been important in your life. And I think that, you may not want to do gardens, but I think all of us need some kind of symbol we can use. For some people it's an altar. I think, I've seen people that have used an altar, their home altar in that way. And I think that can be lovely as well. But there are other things too. I love Lily Lewin, who I'm very jealous of because she's now on Iona.
Very jealous.
Yeah. And she uses art and she uses candles in this way, as she changes the candles that she has on her table. And this is just a wonderful kind of transition type of thing for her, as well as an anchoring thing, I think, in a lot of ways for a season too. And so, finding these symbols, as well as the symbols out in the land, I think I'm learning more and more on my awe and wonder walks to take notice, of the changes that are going on. even though 95% of the plants I see do not belong to the Pacific Northwest, they're still going through changes that the native plants here would be going through as well. And,
right.
kind of taking notice of that can be really important for us all, I think, in ways that are important. So, well, of course, half an hour always goes so quickly. But so we're coming to an end here. Melissa, do you have anything else that you'd like to comment on?
No, I just really enjoyed getting a chance to sort of have this sort of long form discussion with you. And there were a couple of comments that oh, there we go. Yeah, I really appreciated what you had to say about our remembering, and that finding sort of one foot in the place, or in an old place, and then one foot in the now or the future. I enjoyed that comment. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I think, and that was something that you said. I like that. It's probably going to appear in the next book that I write. But no, I mean, because one of the reasons I'm excited about this, particularly excited about this at the moment, is not just because the transitions that so many people are going through, but also because of the fact that I am thinking about writing a book on this. And I remember Philip Yancey once saying to me that, we should write to our passion. And this has very definitely become a passion for me at the moment. And so I'm looking forward to that. But I wanted to just have very quickly a couple of the books that have already inspired me in this. And this is one of them, Worshipping in Season, that looks at the liturgical year from an ecological perspective, and just a fascinating book. And then the Celtic, I think this was where I really started to connect to some of these ideas. And so John Philip Newell's latest book, Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul, is an excellent resource to look at for this. And these are only a couple. Of course, I'm rereading my book, God's Base, to make sure that, any gems that have kind of carried through the years are probably used, and some of them. And I'm amazed at how I think, one of my problems is I have a tendency to be ahead of the curve when I'm writing books. And I look at this one, I think, yeah, this was ahead of the curve. I mean, it would probably sell much better now. It is still available. So, it might be something that you want to look at. And then the other one, which was another step along my journey. And these books, I think, tell some of my journey along my learning of rhythms, is this one, Return to Our Senses. So a fun thing to talk about here. And hopefully, as I said, we will have more sessions on this. And we're trying to think about how we can recruit some of our friends from the Southern Hemisphere to talk about this. But of course, unfortunately, our normal hour is, I looked at it, and a couple of the friends that have really taught me a lot are in Perth, where it would be midnight when we start here. In Sydney, I think it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And in New Zealand, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. So either we'll have to record it beforehand, or we'll have to change the time. So I'm trying to figure out what we can do there. If you have any suggestions on the best way to do it, then I would appreciate that as well. And any other aspects of this rhythms and rituals topic that you would like to hear us talk about rather than seeing in the post, it would be great to hear from you in that too. So thank you, Melissa. I've learned a lot this morning from Melissa, and I hope you have too. I'm sure you have too. So blessings on everybody, and until the next one, from myself and Melissa, and I'm sure
Yes.
from Lily in
Yes.
Scotland. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.